Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Mr. Friedman, in our office, we talked about a two-state solution. We talked about what may be possible. You said it was the gold standard. But in our conversation, and perhaps you could help me to kind of flesh this out a little bit further, you mentioned a scenario under which the West Bank could be incorporated into Israel, and that the country would still maintain its Jewish and democratic identity. Could you go through that scenario and how you look at those numbers and how you would view that as an alternative?
Senator, I don't view it as an alternative. I think, at least to me, the discussion was more in the hypothetical. But I think that I think there is a general conventional wisdom that Israel can either be Jewish or democratic, but not both under that type of a scenario. I don't know the demographics of the West Bank well enough. There are multiple studies that have been done. I think demographics of the West Bank are a very important part of working forward. And I think we ought to all have the same data, because the swings of population assumptions go from 1.5 million Arabs to 3 million. And at 1.5 million Arabs, it's one scenario. At 3 million, it could be another. And I don't know which is true, or if some number in the middle is true. I'm not sure it matters. I was speaking really in the hypothetical, but because demographics matters to any future discussion, we ought to have good data. And I would certainly encourage the Israelis on a nonpartisan basis to try to get better data on those demographics.
But ultimately, do you think the Palestinians would accept a solution that had the West Bank incorporated into Israel, and then if the demographics were such that then they remained in the minority and that Gaza was excluded from a final agreement? Do you think there's a scenario under which the Palestinians could accept a deal that created that new entity and kept the Palestinians in a permanent minority within that greater Israel that would have been created?
I can't imagine that either Israel or the Palestinians would accept a scenario where there were different rights for different citizens in terms of whether the Palestinians were in the majority or the minority. I couldn't speak for them. I would only point out that Israel itself has a very good track record of providing good education, healthcare, commercial opportunities, human rights, rights to the LGBTQ community, support of women's rights. I think Israel is very good to its Palestinian citizens, and so that might be something that the Palestinians in the West Bank might be attracted to, but I would never speak for them.
So you don't personally support Israeli annexation of the West Bank?
No, I do not.
You do not. You're saying that would have to be part of an agreement?
As the president said, all of this has to be agreed to by the parties, or else it won't proceed.
Yeah, because it's hard for me to envision a situation where the Palestinians would allow a division of the question, where the West Bank was a part of the agreement and Gaza and its residents did not have rights that were vested with the citizens of that part of the Palestinian population. What are, if you could, you talked about the two-state solution as the best possibility. Can you give us another possibility in your mind that you think could unfold in terms of an agreement that could be reached between the Israelis and the Palestinians?
Sitting here today, I don't have a better option.
You do not have a better option?
No, I don't.
No. And I know that this terrain has already been traveled in the hearing, but if I could, I'd like to go out and just talk a little bit about the Bet El settlement.
Yes, sir.
And some of the comments from people who are out there. Bet El is training students, for example, to, quote, successfully delegitimize the notion of a two-state solution and creating facts on the ground in the face of the international community's desire to uproot us. Can you talk about comments like that coming out of the Bet El community in Ramallah and your views on those comments in terms of its implication for reaching a two-state solution?
I think they're a challenge among many to achieving a two-state solution. I should point out that my affiliation with Beit El is as the president of the American Friends of Beit El Yeshiva Center. We support a Talmudic academy and a boys' high school and a girls' high school, and it primarily derives from my commitment to Jewish education. The quality of those schools are excellent, and everything that we've given money to has been in the nature of gymnasiums, dormitories, dining rooms, classrooms, things like that. So my philanthropic activity there has not been connected to their political activity, which I really had no part in.
If the land in Bet El was included in a two-state solution and that land had to be returned to the Palestinians, would you support the return of that land to the Palestinians?
In the context of a consensual, fully agreed to two-state solution?
That's correct.
Yes.
You would.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.